The Phoenix Suns had a great season this year, but they had a little bit of a disappointing finish. Let's get into this. The Phoenix Suns should be very proud of what they were able to accomplish this season. They were able to get all the way to the NBA Finals based around a very young team of young and ascending players, centered around Devin Booker. What Devin Booker was able to do this season was just incredible. Throughout his whole career so far, we've known this guy's a superstar, but he's always on a bad team, and we didn't know how he would perform if he actually went to the NBA playoffs. Some players are very good during the regular season, but they completely dwindle when it comes to the playoffs. What we've seen with Devin Booker, and now we know that's definitely not the case. Booker played well throughout the entire season when he had that X on his back and on the Suns' back when they were probably the best team in the NBA at that point. Then entering the playoffs, he had a very good playoffs against the Lakers, who a lot of people, including myself, I'll be honest about it, thought they would lose. And then he had a very good rest of the playoffs. Even in the NBA Finals, he didn't necessarily play well in that Game 6 against the Bucks, but throughout the entire Finals, for the most part, he had an extremely good playoffs, putting up 40-point games back-to-back, and whenever he wanted, honestly. He just had a great playoffs overall, and now that we know for certain that this guy is definitely a franchise player, and he could definitely perform in the playoffs and in the finals in these high-pressure situations. We also learned a lot from a guy like DeAndre Ayton, who was previously the #1 overall pick, and at one point in his career, he was looking a little disappointing, but in these playoffs, he completely turned those haters around, and he played very well in these playoffs. He was doing a great job guarding a guy like Anthony Davis, who is probably one of, if not the best big men we have in the NBA right now. Even though he's hurt, either way, it was very impressive to see, and he also did a great job on Jokic. He's guarding some of the best centers we have in the NBA, and he was doing a very good job on them. He was getting a ton of offensive rebounds in this Bucks series. He was playing very well in the pick and roll with Chris Paul. He was hitting those mid-range jump shots, getting to the line, hitting those hook shots, doing great work in the post. We learned a lot from the guy like DeAndre Ayton as well, and I think going forward, when you're talking about both Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, I think everybody's going to be very excited to see what they could do going forward. Then you look around the other parts of the roster and you look at the role players. You look at a guy like Mikal Bridges, you look at Cam Johnson, you look at guys like that who are just role players, but they are young and have potential. And you saw how well they've played in these playoffs as well. They have great games, especially Mikal Bridges, who had a 30-point game in these playoffs. And he's a great defender as well. Cam Johnson just spraying down threes. He's very efficient with that three-point shot. You just get very excited to see what this Phoenix Suns roster could do going forward with all these great young players and young talent they have going forward. And you would expect all these guys to get better as the years go on. And now they have that finals experience. That's very crucial to their development. Now, when you look at a guy like Chris Paul, I've been saying this throughout the entire season. Chris Paul was really the guy that got everyone together, because when you look at their roster last year, the Phoenix Suns, they basically had the same roster as they have this year. The only difference is they added Chris Paul, and he's a great typical point guard, as we all know, and I always mention this in my videos. He's exactly the main guy you want, but when you talk about a point guard, you want a guy who can calm everyone down and get the ball to the best players in the right spots, create easy shots for your teammates, just make life easier for your teammates, and whenever they start getting wide open looks, they're most likely going to hit it more so than not, and when they start hitting shots, now they're getting their confidence up, and now that's almost going to be impossible to stop. But on top of that, Chris Paul is just a great pick and roll maestro. He has that mid-range jump shot that we've seen throughout these entire playoffs and the regular season. He's just a great addition to this Phoenix Suns team, and of course, he's one of the biggest reasons why they were able to make it all the way to the NBA Finals. Even though they weren't able to win it, unfortunately for him, he was one of the reasons why they were able to even get there. You do kind of feel for him, though, that he wasn't able to win this NBA championship. And with Chris Paul, it's a little bit of a different situation. All the other players I've mentioned before are all young and ascending players, but obviously for Chris Paul, he's already an older player in this league. So you would wonder, could Chris Paul even play another year or two with the Suns? If he does, great. But if he does play with the Suns another 2 years, they have to win an NBA championship within the next 2 years. And will that happen? I'm not sure. This season, there was obviously a ton of injuries, and it was a little bit easier for the Suns to get all the way to the NBA Finals. I'm not saying it wasn't a great accomplishment. Obviously it was. But it's just listing at the facts, there was a ton of injuries this season. So the real question would be, could they actually get back to the NBA Finals in the future when everybody's not hurt? And for Chris Paul, the question is, will he ever win an NBA championship as the main guy? Maybe later on in his career, maybe when he gets washed up a little bit, he may join a team that's already pretty established and has a great chance at winning a championship, and he would just come off the bench or be one of those guys, those role player guys. But I don't know. We have to see if he would ever win a championship actually being one of the main guys on the team. That's the big question. But of course, long term, I think the Phoenix Suns are going to be fine, and they have a very bright future ahead of them, and the fact that they played so well in these playoffs playoffs and got all the way to the NBA Finals, and so many players actually weren't scared by the pressure of the finals and actually still played pretty well, I think it's a great sign for them going forward. But obviously, with that being said, they were definitely the favorites going into these finals against Milwaukee Bucks, and they were up 2-0 and they weren't able to get the job done. So obviously there's a bunch of disappointing things that happened in these finals for them, and now let's get into them. So of course, in games both 1 and 2 for the Suns, they had a great 2 games. They were beating the Bucks in pretty decisive fashion. They were playing great. They were doing what they did the whole season. They had great ball movement. Devin Booker was really taking the ball, isolating, scoring by himself, using that athleticism and that great footwork on the post turnaround fadeaway. He was also just a very gifted offensive player overall. I made a video about him recently, so he can literally do everything on the offensive end. So you have to get this guy the ball in the clutch, especially. He can get you a bucket. But also they had great ball movement. Chris Paul was running the pick and roll very well with DeAndre Ayton. He was getting wide open mid-range shots. He was pulling up, draining them. He's basically automatic from that mid-range spot. He was kicking it to DeAndre Ayton for wide open dunks, layups, or hook shots. He was also finding his open teammates like Mikal Bridges from 3. Mikal Bridges was also going off. They were just playing a great brand of basketball. And on the defensive end, they were doing a great job on Giannis. They were doing a very good job as well on Chris Middleton. Middleton didn't have a great first 2 games, but either way, that was led by the defense. The Suns were able to play on him. They were just doing a great job overall, and they were looking like a championship team at that point. But for the rest of the series after game 2, everything I mentioned before of what they were doing well, they completely fell off and weren't doing that well whatsoever. They weren't able to stop Giannis or even defend Giannis whatsoever. They were definitely not able to stop Chris Middleton. He was going off as well. Drew Holiday was playing very well. Brook Lopez was hitting threes. And on the offensive end, the biggest issue for them is they didn't have that same ball movement that they had in games 1 and 2. It was more so Chris Paul just isolating or Devin Booker just isolating. Now for Devin Booker, it's fine. I think he should isolate, but when you overdo it and don't pass to your teammates whatsoever and really disrupt that ball movement that you had going for you, it really becomes a little bit of a burden. When I talk about Devin Booker isolating, I want to see him isolating in the 4th quarter in the clutch. Yeah, at times here and there during the regular quarters, like the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd quarter, but most of the time I want to see that is when you really need that bucket and you give it to Devin Booker in the clutch and he just gets you that bucket. But they were doing a little too much isolation for my liking, and they weren't getting those wide open threes anymore. And the Bucks were obviously made an adjustment. They were doing a very good job at blitzing that pick and roll with Chris Paul, making sure he wasn't able to get that wide open mid-range shot every time or able to find DeAndre Ayton for a wide open dunk or layup. The Bucks definitely had a part in the Suns not playing as well, but the Suns definitely could have had a better ball movement going for them. The biggest thing for the Suns really is the head coach. Obviously, Monty Williams has done a great job with the Suns the entire season, but the biggest thing in the finals is Mike Budenholzer was able to adjust, but the Phoenix Suns were not able to adjust to that adjustment, because originally, as I mentioned, they were playing so well. They were doing whatever they wanted with the Milwaukee Bucks. They were getting easy baskets. They were playing great defense, but the Bucks actually adjusted after those first 2 losses for them, and then they completely steamrolled the Phoenix Suns the next 4 games, and that's something you really can't have in the NBA Finals if you want to win a championship. So going into the future, next season in the future, the big thing is they have to make adjustments when they get to that playoff scenario, and also you just want to continue to get that ball movement going for this roster. And overall, I think they have a very good roster. They're all young and ascending players. The real big question for me would be, where does Chris Paul go after the season, because he is a free agent? Does he stay with the Phoenix Suns? And if he does, how will this team look? If he leaves, what will happen to this Suns team? I think they're going to be fine, but we'll just see. There's a few questions to see what happens in the future. But even though they struggled in the finals, at least games after game 2, I still think this season was obviously a pretty huge success in my opinion, but we'll see what happens going forward. I think they still have a great future. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think this season was a success for the Phoenix Suns, or do you think it was a little bit of a disappointment at the end? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe and hit that post notification bell. It really helps me out a lot. Until the next time, peace out, guys.